5058. I can now speak to the gold medal winning Paralympian Tanni GreyThompson, who we also know as the crossbench peer, Baroness GreyThompson. She's involved with a new House of Lords committee being put together to increase sporting participation at grassroots level. How concerned are you, good morning, about the sort of activity levels going down during this time?
I'm really concerned because we know in the first lockdown that people's activity levels dropped by about 70%. And it was great, you know, if you're going out for your hour of exercise a day and seeing lots of people walking and running and on bikes, which, you know, they'd probably never used before because the seat height was set wrong. And I did go through a phase of shouting at people to how to set up their bikes, which I think they thought was slightly strange. But the serious side of it is that was spring. Spring, you know, was quite kind to us. We're now going into winter and it's going to be much harder. You know, everyone's living at work, working at home, you know, dark mornings, dark nights. And so giving people opportunity to be active it's not just for now, it's for people's long-term physical health, mental health. It's about keeping people out of the NHS in the long term. And in the middle of a sort of global health pandemic, you know, physical activity has to be a really important part of what people do.
Let's take this in turn then. What do you want the government to do, or the local councils, the powers that be, to make sure that this doesn't continue, this trend?
So it is actually quite complicated. So at a local authority level, physical activity is not a statutory provision. So I'm chair of ukactive, which is the membership body for the sector. And we know that about a third of local authority provision didn't open coming out of the first lockdown. And there's a lot of pressure on public and private sector in terms of support. And there has been, you know, support, which is great, but it takes us so far. So what I'd really like to see the government do is look across all the different departments in terms of how you can embed physical activity into daily life, and think about how you can use physical activity to, you know, help with the Prime Minister's obesity strategy, to look about loneliness. You know, there's lots of things where physical activity can help. We just need to be able to step back a little bit and look at the wider situation. And the reality is, you know, this is the largest borrowing since the Second World War. You know, the economic impact of where we are now is twice the size of the financial crisis in 2008. So, you know, there isn't lots of money, but however, we have to be really smart in terms of how we get everything to join up together. And we know there's a social return on physical activity. For every £1 you invest in community sport, the return's £4. So it's being able to step back and think about how we can do things in a different way. And actually, with our other hat on, that's part of what the Select Committee wants to look at is, you know, does the country need a plan for sport and recreation and physical activity? Can we do things in a different way?
Boris Johnson's going to be speaking later about our lives under these continued restrictions. We've actually been asking our listeners what they feel they need to hear from him, because on one hand you've got all the optimism around the vaccine and optimism around Christmas, but the other way, you got to keep going with this. You've got to persevere, and perhaps we've got to build new ways of living, new patterns into our newly restricted lives. Do you think he should talk again? Because he has spoken already, hasn't he, about the need for physical activity and the need for health. And we learn from reports today that while he's been in isolation in the Downing Street flat, he's been running on the treadmill, doing a few HIIT sessions. Do you think he needs to get back to talking about that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I do. And, it's great that he's got a treadmill where he lives. You know, a lot of people don't have that. And, you know, one of the things we've been talking about for quite a long time is looking at how people through sort of tax through sort of their employment could get equipment at home, could do things in a different way. But yeah, I'd love him to talk about physical activity, because it obviously means a lot to him on a personal level. It's how we join that up in terms of the wider discussions. You know, and every government department, they're working really hard, and there is lots going on, and there are loads of different organisations and bodies asking for support. I absolutely get that, but it's how we look beyond it, because, you know, we know children, you know, Tracy Neville said, children have been out of school for at least 23 weeks this year, and we know that up till September. It's much harder to track the figures now because each school's doing different things. You know, they've been out of physical activity, they've been out of after school clubs, and children and young people will find other things to do. We know that if before the crisis, the 5 fittest children in a class today would have been the 5 least fittest 30 years ago. So we knew we were in crisis before this.
Wow.
And then the pandemic just
That's stark, isn't it?
more and more layers. I mean, it's kind of terrifying. So, and so if they're missing it, this goes for all children. You'll find other things to do. Parents will find parents who are in. The lockdown's been really hard on an awful lot of people. There's good things out of it. Suddenly we find we have the technology to work from home, and there's been online fitness things, and some really cool stuff that's happened. But actually, what we know from the gym and the leisure sector, that it means a lot to people to be able to go somewhere and be physically active. Yes, socially distanced, but ukactive worked with Chief Medical Officer and Sage, and to bring in guidance which was about hygiene and cleanliness and physical distance of equipment, and that was great. It's great that there's been a recognition that whatever the new tier system looks like, that physical activity is an important part of that. But actually, on the other side of it, group exercise is excluded, so that's not going to be allowed in tier 3. And 78% of women do, group exercise. So it's thinking about, and to be honest, I mean, somebody said this to me this week, and, even though I'm so involved in it, I haven't thought of it in this way. With the equipment being physically distanced, that's what happens in, say, a spin class, all the equipment's. The difference between doing it on the gym floor is you're actually doing it with someone telling you what to do and music. So it's just thinking outside the box a little bit. But, lots and lots of decisions are having to be taken at the moment. But
try and not lose motivation, I suppose, all round is the message as well for yourself at the moment. Tanni GreyThompson, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much for talking to us about the importance of not forgetting sport and people coming together in that way to just simply move.